Okay. So welcome everyone to another Into the West video. And my name is Charles. With me is Richard, and we have a guest here with us, friend of the channel. It's Jake DeLuey. Welcome back.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, today Jake's joining us to talk a little bit about his recent experience abroad playing MESBG.
Jake actually, placed second at this GBHL 100 City of Kings and first place at the Denmark Articon opener, right? So you performed super well at both of these tournaments. So talk about like what the level of competition is like.
I was so close to first. I just blew it in the last few turns.
I was so close.
You've been on this channel before, but I think we haven't really talked about like your competitive experience even in North America and like, the tournaments that you've been to. So maybe you could go into a little bit about.
For the past 5 months or so, my fiance and I packed everything up and we've been traveling around. We started in Europe and we're there for about 2 months jumping around. We went to New Zealand and South Korea, and now we actually just got back into the UK and Europe again. Had the chance to play in a few different on the SBG events while doing that. So I played in one in Denmark in January, and then I actually played in like a small Blitz event in New Zealand as well. Super non-competitive, but like pretty fun. And then played in City of Kings in the UK this past weekend. As I traveled, I packed up like a small case of models and I've gotten a chance to play in a variety of different places, which is a lot of fun. A cool way to meet local people and bring my hobby on the road. Prior to that, I was based in Los Angeles, California, and I played a lot in the Pacific Northwest. As you guys know, it's where I met you guys. Have just enjoyed playing in that area for a while. I think there's a really great mix of like competitive players there as well as just really nice people and people that I enjoy being around. And like it's a great mix of a lot of those events. You can go and have these competitive games and then, on Saturday evening you go out and you have drinks and talk about it and have fun. And so I've just really enjoyed playing there. I've also gone to Adepticon several times, try to hit as many of the like major US tournaments as I can. Unfortunately, I've never been to Nova due to conflicts with my other hobby, which is swing dancing. I've never been to Nova, but have tried to go to as many other like competitive events around the US as possible.
Yeah, and you were the winner of our last Masters tournament at Clash on the Coast.
I was, yeah. That was fun because like that was four very hard fought games. Each game was like very difficult and like was going up against a player that you maybe expect to find in like the final round of any other tournament. That was a lot of fun. Over the last year or so, I have started playing better, and like part of that has been like partially mindset in terms of like really approaching the game in terms of rather than going into an event and being like, oh, I have to win, I have to do really good. Because then you can psych yourself out and trying to approach it as like, okay, in this event, my goal is to just play against the best people I can and have really good games. It's taken like a little bit of the edge off of the stress, which I think then helps me calm down and play better generally.
Just a bit of spoilers, but that kind of happened to you at the City of Kings. You played, pretty much the GBHL All-Stars,
Are you serious?
so
Yeah.
well, we'll get into that. But yeah, I think what you just highlighted really sets like the topic we're going to talk about today because I think you have a really unique experience and perspective. There isn't a whole lot of Americans that have played in Europe. I know there is the group from the Unexpected podcast from the East Coast that generally goes over, but I believe a lot of their experiences, playing at Articon, which is a very international event, and now like the Nations Cup. So I think obviously that's good experience as well, but I think it's kind of cool that you've played in, Denmark and a GBHL 100, which talking to Elliot from Golms Gamers, he was saying that some of the super competitive UK players actually don't end up going to Articon. A lot of them actually go to other GBHL 100s instead. And so that was probably one of the reasons why you got to face like, a lot more concentrated mix of the competitive UK players too.
Yeah. Can't remember where I heard that, but I've heard that as well. It's interesting because I kind of like consider Articon to be like a MESBG mecca. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's just interesting to hear that like local UK players won't go, but I suppose it's quite expensive. It was interesting talking to some of the UK players. One of the things that they mentioned is you're somewhat spoiled for convenience. I'm used to almost every tournament that I've ever gone to, I've flown to and like stayed in a Airbnb or a hotel or whatever. But like even for this 2 day event, like there were a good number of people that were like would just leave in the evening and drive back to it was an hour and a half maybe to their homes and then drive back in the morning. And like that's definitely doable for them. And I think that there's a lot of players that can do that for most of the events that they go to, if not all of them. Yeah, it's just like a different way of approaching the game and playing. And I mean, it makes sense because there's so many events going on and like all over the country, and the country is pretty small that like you can totally do that. One kind of interesting result of that was like we had the Saturday night, the organizers put on a trivia night where there was a group of people that were staying around that could stay and play. And that was quite fun. I really enjoyed it and that was a good chance to meet some more people. But I think it was interesting because I was kind of surprised at how few people actually stayed for the Saturday night. It was only about
Mhm.
15 of us out of a player base of like 50. And that goes back to like most of the people were driving back in the evening to go back to their homes and sleep and come back. So just an interesting kind of different way that they approach tournaments, or a very local way.
Mhm.
It's not just the travel distance, but just I've heard that there's just a lot more events there. For here, it's like there's one event a month locally that everyone's kind of talking about and preparing. Meanwhile, there you probably have multiple tournaments that you can choose to go to every weekend if you wanted to.
100%. It's interesting because like looking at the GBHL schedule as I was trying to like pick out things that I wanted to try and go to, there's both more events than I'm used to, and just like a lot of events in general, and also like not as many hundreds as I expected because I was like looking at possible hundreds, 2 dayers, and I think that's at like don't quote me on this, but it's like at one a month, maybe sometimes two a month, which is still like a lot, right? But
Mhm.
I guess I was expecting it to be more like I think I thought there was going to be like 25 over the course of the year, and I don't think that there's that many.
I would still love to be in an area with a once a month 100, right? Like that would be
Yeah.
awesome. But yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, to Charles's point, I think we have one like once a month, but those are usually like 1 day local ones and like the really big ones, 2 day ones, competitive ones that we look forward to are probably only a couple times a year. And we do want to usually get together, and that's what you see people travel for. And then, you want to catch up with them. So I think that's the nice thing. So getting into more like the direct comparisons, have you seen any differences in like the armies being played on
Hmm.
a North American, competitive tournament basis versus the ones in the UK and I guess other parts of Europe?
I can start with the like GBHL. I think first thing I'll caveat this with is like these tournaments that I've played in have been like my only tournaments of the new edition. So like I will be in some ways comparing like new edition to old edition. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. The first thing that I'll mention is like in terms of differences, there's the Northwest Hobbit League, which is in the Pacific Northwest, the US. You guys run probably about like what is it, 300s a year, one in like Portland, one in Seattle, one in Vancouver, roughly. And then the rest are other events. The hundreds that the Northwest Hobbit League runs, they are the big events that bring out as many people as we can come and play. And so like that's what makes them big. If you compare that to like 100 the 100 in the GBHL, I really think that there is and this goes back to like having so much choice and like having so many multiple tournaments running on a weekend. Like it actually does separate itself into like the competitive players go to hundreds, and the players that are not as competitive might go to an 80 or 90 instead. And like, whereas at the hundreds in the Pacific Northwest, it's like that's just everybody that we can get to come out and have a good time. Whereas like in the GBHL, it is tends to be more the players who want to like go and compete. And I think that that shows up in some of the armies. If you look at some of the armies in US tournaments, you'll have like a wide range from like these are the most competitive, like most optimized armies to like I'm just bringing this for fun and like we're just having fun. Whereas like at City of Kings, there were very few like lists that I would be like walking up to the table and being like, oh, I have an immediate advantage. Most of them were quite competitive. There's something like 6 or 7 Men of the West. Surprised that there were no Dales, but
I think there were 6 or 7 Airborne reclaimed as well, right?
6 or 7 Erebor reclaimed. There's a few Lothlorians, Chunkum, Reclamation of Osgiliath. Those are all like really solid lists that like I would expect to be able to do well at any tournament. That was definitely the case. I would say in Denmark, it was a little bit more like the US in that it was a range of different players. It was a month into the new edition, so some people were just like taking what they wanted to take that they could now take. And some players like really playing competitively, especially because that was an Articon qualifier. And so like some players were really trying to like win and qualify and do the best that they could.
Everyone wants to know the next thing is getting into the terrain. Is it true?
Bless me. The legends are true.
The terrain, honestly, at City of Kings, terrain was like great, awesome. One of the special rules of the event was that you could bring a maximum 9-inch by 9-inch piece of terrain and place it on the board before deployment. So I brought Rivendell. Naturally, I brought a woodland piece of terrain that had some obstructing things that I could use for defense with archers as well. And that would allow my guys to walk through, obviously modeling for advantage. And so the rule was like, if it had to be placed 3 inches from the center, 3 inches from an objective, and 3 inches from other terrain. And if you couldn't satisfy that, you would replace an existing piece of terrain on the board. I don't think there was a single game where I didn't have to replace another piece of terrain, which means that the terrain was dense enough. There wasn't like a ton of open ground that you could just plop in another piece of terrain. So like major hats off to the organizers for making the terrain great there. I think, and like talking with some folks, I think it really just depends on the event. In terms of GBHL 100s, this was definitely not like the biggest. There were 50 players. You compare that to like into the West, which was the event, I think a few months ago. They have like 130 players. So it's like, 25 boards versus 65 boards. And it's just hard to source that much terrain, which I think goes into sometimes having less terrain on boards. I think Articon probably runs into a similar problem, which is like famously where people like to complain about. But my experience was that it was great.
I think the memes that I've seen were like made after Articon, so I think you're right about that.
Yeah. I took Rivendell. Like I have good shooting, but I also know that like my shooting isn't gonna outshoot everybody. And I played against Halls of Thranduil, which is like an army that I expect to not outshoot, and was able to avoid like taking too many shooting casualties going in. I played against Erebor Acclaimed, similar story, like their crossbows will outshoot me 100% of the time, but was able to mostly avoid too many casualties by using the terrain. So like it really helped my gameplay to be able to utilize it.
So overall, like probably comparable to, like an Adepticon.
Yeah, I heard some people say that Adepticon this year was a little sparse, but like I would say, yeah, pretty comparable to Adepticon or Clash on the Coast. It's like the range where it's like I don't notice it being too little and I don't notice it being too much. Like there's probably some variability within it, generally speaking. it just feels like right, feels about appropriate.
Okay, so I guess speaking of the special terrain, like that's something that is interesting because we generally don't have that, I guess, level of house rules in super competitive North American events. So how was that like playing a competitive event, but there's not only like the bring your own terrain, but there were also unique scenarios, custom scenarios at a tournament like that.
I'll start with the custom rules in general. I think part of that, goes back to like there is a history in the GBHL of having plenty of events. The more events you have, the easier it is to get tired of like playing the exact same rule set over and over. And whereas like for us, if we're playing one event per month, that is like less of an issue. Like you by the like you can let's say you're playing like 3 to 4 armies over the course of a year. That's like 3 events per army, which is like you're not really getting tired of playing like new opponents and with a new army and stuff. And so I think with the GBHL, like they try to spice things up sometimes. And I think that is like there's a history with this event of bringing the terrain piece and doing something like that. It's interesting. Like I'm a person who reads the event pack or tries to read the event pack in advance and like really understand how I'm planning to play my army and handle like the different special rules of the event. I think this is what was written in the event pack was that it was going to be your terrain was deployed within your deployment zone. And so like I was really expecting it to be like this is defensive. What it ended up being is like we placed it before picking deployment zones and picking sides. So it ended up shifting a little bit. The biggest impact that any of the train pieces had was actually I played against a watcher. So like with the watcher now you can put the models anywhere. So he had the watcher like just out of his water piece, but like within like a half an inch or something, he would grab a model, fail to kill it, put it behind him so that is touching the deep water terrain. Like I because we never play with deep water, right? But like you bring your terrain piece, you can specify what this is. So
Hmm.
touching the deep water terrain, swim test dies. Does another one behind, swim test dies. So like,
Wow.
he was just drowning all of my elves. So that one was definitely like the biggest impact of the terrain that I saw. The rest of it was just like it just became another piece of terrain on the board. Sometimes it helped me out because like I'm elves and can move through woodland, but most of the time it was just like just another terrain piece. And
That's
then
pretty nasty.
the yeah, I ended up actually playing against 2 watchers, which I don't think I've seen people in the at least in like the into the West Discord and like people that I'm hearing talk about, like I don't think anybody's talking about watchers. So that was an interesting like new experience.
I'm just surprised that playing Rivendell, you didn't bring a custom water feature because obviously water would help you as well.
Yeah, my experience with playing on boards that have water features with Rivendell is that people just tend to avoid it like the plague. There are advantages to me and also disadvantages in that my troops move through it more slowly. Elrond ended up picking enough kills to pick up Fortify Spirit, and I was playing against Army of the White Hand with Saruman, and I was crucially able to resist a spell in the last turn that let me win the game. So uh, nice little pickup there. Again, I thought it was going to be like you deployed it in your deployment zone. And so like having a forest that is like defensible, I was thinking for like destroy the supplies. There were certain scenarios I was like, okay, this would be better to be able to like move around and have some cover from shooting
Hmm.
versus um, having a piece of terrain where just like nobody goes because if they do, they're going to die. Um, yeah, that was kind of my thinking. Um, that just like when there is water on the board, people just do not walk in it. No matter what, they don't walk in it against Rivendell.
I guess you would use it in a different way if you were to do that. It'd be like an offensive piece of terrain, kind of screen enemies from entering as one side, one part of the board.
Right, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a cool rule, the bring your own terrain.
Yeah, it was fun. And it gave me like another thing to think about and focus on, which is cool. And then as far as the custom scenarios go, I really enjoyed it. So let's see, there was one that was like modified heirloom they just passed where there's like six. And I've played that scenario several times and have really liked it each time because it's like there's six spread around that you have to dig up and then bring them to the center of the board. And you get points if you've dug up an heirloom and have it in the center of the board. Maelstrom that really rewards um, if you like kind of spread out a little bit, which I think is always fun. Like the maelstrom that I don't like is when it's like two armies that arrive on the same like on the side of the board right next to each other and then just start to beat each other up. I like when it's like, oh, there's multiple battles happening like in different parts of the board. I think that that's fun. And
Mhm.
and so I like that that scenario rewards that. And then there was one that was like basically similar to domination with a little bit of a twist. And then there was one that was like similar to the death with a little bit of a twist. And that one, as your leader picks up kills, they get buffs. And that actually really helped me out because Elrond ended up picking enough kills to pick up Fortify Spirit. And I was playing against Army of the White Hand with Saruman. And I was crucially able to resist a spell in the last turn that let me win the game. So nice little pickup there.
So, the question that I think most people want to ask, what is the level of play like? GBHL, obviously, given that they're the biggest league probably in MESBG in the world, and they have a super developed, tournament scene. Most people do rightfully so think that like that's usually like the highest level of play, and a lot of places around the world, us included, we follow the results of those tournaments to kind of develop a meta or like what's good sometimes because they have a lot more tournaments than us. So just talk about like what the level of competition is like.
I talked to actually Andrew Palmieri, friend of the podcast, about this a little while ago and about his experience at Articon. And this is what he told me, and I think it very much is similar to my experience in that like the highest level of play is not really different. So like if I look at the best players, in my experience, the best players from the US compared to US and Canada, compared to like the best players or the players that I played against at the GBHL, like it's pretty comparable.
Interesting.
Obviously I did well and like was able to give good games to all these different players. The big difference is the I think the talent goes deeper in the UK. And again, part of this might be because I went to a GBHL 100 and like it self-selects for all the most competitive players. The US, generally speaking, if I go to a tournament, I expect round one to be probably against a player who's like just showing up for a good time. They don't not super experienced. And it starts to like stratify between like the top of the standings are like the competitive players who have come to like really compete, and then the ones more towards the mid and the bottom are like the players that are here for a good time, which is great. And so usually like games one and two, especially at a big tournament, you kind of expect them to be like a little bit easier, and then as you start to get into three and four, and then like five and potentially six, that's when competition gets like more stiff. In round one, I played the winner of the UK Masters. He hasn't been playing for like a super long time, but like obviously still really good. And then round two, I played, I think he's like currently number six or seven in the GBHL. Similar to my experience at the Northwest Hobbit League Masters, it was like every player that I played against like was really quite good. I was fighting in each of those games for my win. So I think that's the big difference. If you go to one of these PBHL tournaments, you have to expect to like play really good players the entire way, which means that like you have to be on the entire weekend because if you slip up, then that, like you drop a game and that's your tournament. So I think that that's like a big difference. You have to consistently perform over the course of the weekend in order to pull out like a victory or a podium. as opposed to like there's a few more ebbs and flows in a US tournament where you can like relax sometimes.
That makes a lot of sense, like given how they break up their tournaments and how you explained the competitive players going to the hundreds. Myself and Charles have both gone to Adepticon and Nova, and obviously Clash on the Coast is a similar story where we see numbers around 80 to 100 players. And I would personally say that probably only a good 15 to 20 are like truly super competitive in their mindset and list building, like going to the tournament. And then maybe half of that number who are truly not only have the mindset, but have a really good shot at like winning the tournament or podium, right? So like
Yeah.
that's kind of generally your competition. It's interesting you compare it to our Masters tournament because, obviously competing in that one, that was a grind. And I believe what we did 4 games
Yeah.
in that
In the
tournament.
minute.
And yeah, I was just exhausted. It was actually probably harder than the GT itself. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think you make a good point that it's like a mental grind. Every game is hard.
And I think not trying to like make excuses, but I do think that there is an aspect of like, again, UK players tend to look down on American competition. And but like I do think that there is an aspect that most of the time when an American is coming over to play in the UK, I don't know if this is like as much of an impact for other people, but it certainly is for me. Like the jet lag combined with again needing to perform for all of these days certainly has to play like a factor in ability to like consistently stay concentrated over the entire time period. Like, I mean, if you look at Articon, which, I mean, if you play in every tournament, it's 5 consecutive days of gaming. And if you're jet lagged throughout that entire thing, like, I can't even imagine. I was absolutely wrecked. Like, I was coming from South Korea. So I was actually jet lagged for City of Kings. I was completely wrecked by the end of it. I can't imagine doing 5 days also on like low sleep jet lag. That would be really rough. I guess spoilers, like, so I lost my last game and that's why I got second. If I was going to try and sum up why I lost the last game, so my opponent, Ali King, he, we talked about this after the game. Like he made a little bit of a blunder in the beginning. He was backing up to give himself time to shoot. And so he backed up out of 6 inches of my front line, but like he didn't go all the way back. He could have gone farther back and stayed completely out of range, but he was within 10 inches of Elrond. So I decided to just go for it. And like normally, I don't send Elrond in right away. I like to sit back and use Wraths, especially with his composition of Erebor Reclaimed and like his heroes being able to completely resist Wraths due to Bofur. I wanted to like pick up some kills, be aggressive, and so I just sent Elrond in. And I was able to basically use that as a way to like really push the advantage and start putting a lot of pressure on him. Even though we were pretty even on kill count, we both felt like I was winning most of the game. And at the very end, it like kind of came down to a few decisions. It was Fog of War. And like one, it's the new Fog of War. So I don't have a good mental model on like how to calculate mentally, like, am I winning or am I losing? Combine that with like time pressure and fatigue from jet lag, like all of those things together, like I just couldn't get a grasp on like where I stood points wise in Fog of War. I didn't feel like I could take the time to be like, here, let me take like 3 minutes and like mentally run through the checklist. And so what I ended up doing is like all I really needed to do was run away with Lindir and probably Arwen, like run away with my 2 heroes that I was protecting and that he was trying to kill. And like I would have had the terrain piece. I think at that point I had leader kill too. And he was going to get a terrain piece, but he was only going to get it with one person. So, anyways, Lindir died in the last turn, and that was like the 10-point swing that took me to losing. So it was like all of those factors, not realizing that like, oh, the only thing that I need to do is move Lindir away and like run away with him, and he wouldn't have gotten caught or taken a wound. All which is to say, like, yeah, all of those things kind of like just compound and make it harder to like make a split second decision that's correct in the moment.
Yeah. No, it's hilarious because whenever I see those comments on, you saying like North American players get disrespected, it's so true. Like, and I see this sometimes in the Discord, and then, they bring up like how there's some UK players, who came over like in 2016 or something, and then they like, destroyed Nova or something. I'm like, bro, like most of the competitive North American players like did not play like did not play back then. So it's cool to see you do so well and have this comparison because you not only attend like the big tournaments in North America, but like you've consistently done well in a lot of them. So which includes like, constantly playing all the best players. Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I assume Denmark, obviously, it was like one of their bigger events.
It was actually pretty small. I think it ended up being like something like 20 players. It's really not that big. I would say it felt more like a US event in terms of like the lists taken and the like stratification of like there are a few really top players that are like gunning to win this thing. And then there are some players that are just kind of there for fun and taking a fun list, taking something new in the new edition. A little bit more like a US event. That one was interesting because it was 20 players, but 6 games. I got up to the top pretty quickly and then just like had to defend my position the entire weekend, which was its own set of challenges because like I still was in a position where if I dropped any game, I was like in danger of still not taking first. And so I ended up playing, I would say, probably all of the best players there over the course of the weekend. It felt like fending them off, in a sense.
That's always the hard part. I guess it's a good problem to have, but when you're sitting on top table the entire
Right.
tournament, yeah, it can be a grind.
City of Kings, I didn't feel that. Because like generally speaking, Rivendell, I would say it's not as easy to like just blow people out of the water and like take 20 O's.
No pun
Um,
intended.
yeah, no pun intended. No, it tends to pick up like mid-level wins, I'd
Mhm.
say, unless something really good happens. So I was getting like a lot of like 10 O's, like somewhere in that range. So I ended up not having to like I didn't jet to this like top and then have to defend my position. I was kind of like slowly worked my way up.
But you slowly working your way up, like we've talked about, you played the winner of the GBHL Masters.
Yeah,
You played Ali King in the last round, and I believe you played Dave Farmer, who is currently in
yeah,
first in the GBHL. So,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, no, like you said, slowly working my way up ended up being probably some of the best players at the tournament, or at least some very, very strong players at the tournament.
You made us all very proud by taking a podium spot.
Thank you. I very much enjoy the Into the West Discord, like in terms of the community that it's built and like being able to like take a break from my games and like open up the Discord and see all the people cheering me on. It feels really good and really nice to have all that support throughout the weekend.
yeah, shout out to us.
This is my
So, pat
plug
on the
for
back.
subscribing to the Patreon so that you can enjoy some of that great community support.
Yeah. So, you're going to be in Europe still for like, a good chunk of the year still. So,
Yeah, yeah.
what tournaments are you looking to, jump in? Are you going to go to the next GBHL 100 that you can?
Well, the next GBHO 100 is actually this weekend. So no, I won't be going to that. I had this desire, which was I thought it would be really funny if I came in and tried to win best GBHL newcomer. Um, I don't think it's going to happen because they take the top 6 tournaments that you go to, and it's going to be tough for me to get to 6 events. So we'll see if that happens. I am going to try. So I'm going to Nations Cup. I'm playing with Team USA at Nations Cup. So I'm really excited about that. I used to play competitive chess, and I in high school, and like I absolutely loved the way that competitive chess teams worked. It was like similar to Nations Cup, kind of, in that like you were playing your own individual game, but you had all of your teammates whose games also mattered towards the overall team score.
Mm.
And so I'm really excited for that opportunity to like play with the team. And I'm going to Articon. I'll be playing in the Masters and the GT. And I think I'll probably play in the last chance qualifier just for fun as well. TBD on if I try to take a list to practice with or if I try to take a list just to have fun with. We'll see. Those are two events I'm for sure going to. And I'm going to try and fit in maybe like at least one more. Like it might be 100, it might be more like a 90. We'll just have to see. But I'd like to fit at least one more in.
Quite ready for another adventure.
Oh, that's awesome. Hitting up all the really big tournaments. We've heard a lot about Nations Cup. We covered it last year. I don't think there's a Team Canada this year, so I think unfortunately we'll have to cheer for you guys.
Do you recommend for people that are thinking about traveling to Europe from like North America to play, would you recommend that? And then also like people over in Europe, like coming over here, what are your thoughts about that? People who are thinking about traveling.
I'm always an advocate for like coming and playing. Like I love this game and it's a great opportunity to like meet new people and get exposed to like different wider play styles and things like that. So always an advocate for that. I would say like unless you're going to like Articon Mecca, probably don't just come for the tournament, like come do the tournament and then like see other parts of the UK or Europe or whatever. But absolutely, I'd recommend going. In terms of UK players coming to the US, like absolutely, I'd love to see more players come, especially like I'm surprised, well, maybe not surprised. Like I'd love to see more of them come to Nova. Like it's really not that like the flight from us on the West Coast of the US to get to Nova is basically the same as somebody from the UK going to Nova. They can do it. They're just like spoiled for choice with all the other events that they have. And for some people, I imagine the fact that Articon is so close is a factor as well, like to do those two back to back. I will say this. I told Dave Farmer this because I heard him on I think a Goms Gamers podcast talking about like his experience and his desires, and he mentioned wanting to go to LVO. And I talked to him and he said like part of that is wanting to go to Vegas, which like if you want to go to Vegas, go to Vegas. Like I have always enjoyed LVO, even though I wouldn't necessarily think of it for my personality. Like I enjoy being in Vegas. But if you're like trying to hit up the biggest MESBG tournaments in the US, like don't specifically go for LVO. It didn't happen this past year. Sometimes like it's like just not always a consistently big event. Yeah, I guess throwing that out there. Don't want somebody to show up and be like, oh, I came to this big US tournament and there's only, 30 MESBG players.
Yeah, I think it's still growing. I've heard that it's grown every year, and so if it does come back, I'm sure it will get to be like a bigger tournament because of the location and the venue is pretty cool. But I think as of right now, like you said, I think the premier North American tournaments are the Nova Open in DC, Adepticon now in Milwaukee, and then Clash on the Coast in Vancouver. I think
Yeah.
North America, those are ones that we look to every year.
Yeah, and no shade to Patrick, who's the organizer of LVO. I think he's done a really great job. It's more like minor shade to the actual convention, in that like they do a very poor job of supporting Patrick as the organizer to like let him put on a good event.
Shout out to our awesome Patreon community. Check out Patreon for more details, which includes extra perks like extra content and custom dice. I also want to shout out our sponsors. Check out the Baron of Dice website for a wide range of dice, including for Middle-earth. And check out the Mithril Brush painting contest dedicated to Middle-earth. We're doing a giveaway for all patrons who've entered by the end of the year. Links in the description below.
Okay, well, Jake, thanks for coming on to talk to us about your experience overseas, and we definitely hope to see more people come here and more opportunities for us to travel over there to play in their tournaments like you. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.